Let's move on to our next page. This lesson does continue on to another page. We're going to start to talk about another thing. So we practiced diameter and radius of circles. Now we're going to look at and find the circumference of a circle. Circumference is the distance around the circle. So when I look at this circle, we're measuring this distance around. How far around is that, or how big around is that circle? Now, when we're finding circumference, these are our two equations. We choose which one we're using based off of what we are given. So the first one, if we're given the diameter, we use that first equation. If we're given our radius, r, we use our second equation. So depending on what you know, that's the equation you'll choose. Now, real quick, that pi symbol, this is pi right here. Pi, we're going to approximate, we're going to use 3.14 or 22/7 for pi. We're always going to approximate it. So remember, pi is a number that goes on forever, doesn't really repeat, but to simplify it, we always use 3.14. So let's do some examples here. This red circle, really it's a frisbee, this red frisbee here is measuring 5 inches. They show that measurement. Now first, is that the radius or is that the diameter that they're giving us? Okay, it's that halfway point. We look up here at our circle to remind ourselves the halfway point, that would be our radius. So our radius equals 5 inches. So if I know my r, I'm going to choose the equation that has my r in it. So let's plug in what we know. Circumference equals 2 times pi, which we're using as 3.14, times our radius, which is 5. So now what I would like you to do, again, you always get to use a calculator. All you're going to do now is multiply these three numbers together. You might even want to simplify it yourself. 2 times 5 is 10. 10 times 3.14, move your decimal once. We get our circumference to equal 31.4 inches. Make sure you're writing down these notes, taking your time, pausing as you need to fully understand it. Make sure you always have your units. All right, next, let's look at this watch. Our watch. They're giving us a line all the way through and across that circle. What does that line represent? That 28 is going to be our diameter. So we are given diameter this time. So we're going to use the other equation, the one that gives us diameter. So we have circumference equals pi times diameter. So let's plug in what we know. We're going to continue to use 3.14 for pi times our diameter of 28. Now, the reason I'm using 3.14, I just think it's a lot easier if you have the calculator. You can't really put the fraction into the calculator, and I know how much you guys are reliant on that calculator, so I don't mind if we always use 3.14. With my mathematical practices, I would have used 22/7 here because I know 7 and 28 are divisible by each other. Again, that might be higher level thinking. You don't have to think that way. Either way works. So now all you have to do is just multiply these numbers together. So put 3.14 and 28 into your calculator. And we are going to get our circumference to equal about 88. And make sure we have our units. It's going to be 88 meters, or you might want to put exactly what's on your calculator, 87.92 millimeters. Usually if it's a short decimal like that, you want to leave it exactly how it's given. Sometimes decimals go on forever. I might tell you specifically what I would like you to round to or round about. Usually you could just use whatever your calculator puts out there for you. All right, next, I will say this is tricky. We get into another subject here. This lesson has a lot of things you're learning. We're going to find the perimeter of a semicircle. So thinking of a semicircle is half of a full circle. Semicircle is half of a full circle. We're going to find the perimeter of the semicircular region. Guys, when I say that word perimeter means we're finding or adding up the entire outside of this shape. So we have this base that is 6, but we have to figure out what is this curved part. Okay, that's what we're trying to figure out, and then we want to find the total there. Okay, so note, since a semicircle is half of a circle, the distance around the curved part is half of the circumference of a circle. Guys, circumference of a circle is just us finding the distance around the circle, basically us finding the perimeter. So we're going to find the circumference of the full circle and then divide it by 2 since it's only half of that circle. And then we're going to add back in this base here, this 6, which is represented by the diameter. So this is our equation for finding the perimeter of a semicircle. Something important we're really going to want to remember and know. So write that down somewhere. Maybe you're going to refer back to these videos. So let's figure out what we know. We first have to find the circumference of the circle. Circumference, guys, this 6 that we're given, that's the diameter. So we're going to use the circumference formula. Let's remember the one that has diameter in it, which would be this first one here. So circumference equals pi times diameter. So I'm going to write that down so we don't forget. We're going to take that circumference, we're going to divide it by 2, and then we're going to add our diameter to that. So we have a lot of variables here in front of us, okay? What I want us to do is we're going to simplify this. We're going to plug in what we know and start to evaluate. Again, we're going to use 3.14 for pi. Let me make sure you guys can read this. 3.14 for pi times our diameter, which is 6. We're going to multiply those together, divide it by 2, and then we're going to add our diameter back in, which is 6. So go ahead, let's multiply 3.14 times 6. When we multiply those together, I get 18.84. Let's divide that by 2. Since we only want it for half of the circle, that circumference it gave us at first was for a full circle. Now we know that this arched piece right here is 9.42. That's that distance. So if we want the full perimeter, we're going to have that arched piece plus the diameter. So that's why we're still adding that diameter back in. So now do 9.42 plus 6, and we get a total diameter of 15.42 meters. Don't forget your units. All right. If you need to rewatch this video, rewatch it as many times as you need to. This is our first lesson here of this chapter. It's kind of a long one. I kind of threw a lot of information at you in a fairly quick amount of time. I hope you took the time, paused the video where you needed to, wrote down the notes, okay? Or maybe you're just watching it through this first time. You're going to go back and rewatch it again, which is fine. But make sure you take notes. There's really important formulas here, right? This one right in front of us, how to find the perimeter of a semicircle. We have our 2 circumference formulas here that you want to make sure you have down somewhere so you don't forget. And then looking back at that first page, we also had our 2 formulas, the one to find the radius and the one to find the diameter. So make sure you have all 5, that's 5 different formulas that I gave you today written down somewhere, okay? If you need to maybe draw a circle that looks like this and label a radius versus a diameter, that might be a good idea so that you remember and start to understand the vocabulary. What's the radius versus a diameter? You're going to need to be able to